Ayomide here, and guess what? We're back for more incredible journeys into the lives of everyday heroes on the World Without People podcast. Dive into more vibrant stories, shared experiences, and mind blowing perspectives with me in season 2. New faces, new stories, but the same old vibe. So, whether you're a seasoned listener or just stumbling upon this oasis of humanity, welcome. Grab your favorite beverage and join the adventure. Let's celebrate the beauty of the world, one remarkable story at a time. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of The World Without People. My name is Ayomide, and I'm so glad to be here today with Dr. Adun Okupe, who is the principal advisor for Red Clay, a firm that she established in 2018. And she's going to tell you a little bit more about herself, but I am so glad to have her here. She doesn't know, but she was one of the few, especially women, who I knew who was pursuing a PhD while I was trying to get mine. And I mean, very few. I think maybe I knew one other person, and that's been such an inspiration to me. And I just wanted to let you know that because I don't think I've ever told you that. But welcome, Dr. Adun Okupe.
Thank you so much. And thanks for that. I didn't know this, and it's a great joy. And I think it's an honor to be here and to hear that I've been part of your journey in some way. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so today we're going to be talking a lot about tourism, which is what Red Clay is trying to champion in Nigeria. But I think before that, I want us to even go a little bit back to how you even got into that field. Because I know you're a chartered accountant, but what made you pivot into this space of tourism?
Okay, great question. And to be honest, I'm an economist. I'm also a chartered accountant. And my first role after university, I was really doing a lot of work looking at infrastructure, government, healthcare, private-public partnerships. And I love traveling. I've always loved traveling. So it was that sense of, reading The Economist and just finding out how much tourism contributed to certain countries' GDP. And I started to question what we could do in Nigeria and why we didn't have such a concerted tourism effort. And it was one of those things that the more you dig down, the more you find, as I'm sure you know. And then I also just kind of looked at myself and I'm like, okay, I spend this amount of money when I go to Italy or when I go to France or wherever I used to travel to. And I just said, okay, if they had 1 million people coming every year, just multiply that by 1 million. Gosh, that's 1 billion, right? And it just gives you this sense of the opportunity that is there. But I think that perhaps the challenge that I say is most times, government sees these things as, they want the big numbers, but they don't realize that actually the little drops of water can really make a huge ocean. Right. So that's why I'm here, to help them see that.
Awesome. And I want to start with a very, very silly question, which is this idea of IJGBs, which if you're not Nigerian here means I just got back. And that's the people that typically flood Nigeria in December or holiday period. So I'm guessing that there's a sigh of relief for the locals, for lack of a better term, when everybody is back. But I feel like that's been a big part of Nigerians' culture that I don't see in other countries. Am I wrong? I feel like we make a whole effort around the IJGBs, whereas for maybe other countries, it's just people coming back home, like, people coming in for holidays. And maybe it's the idea that people spend a lot more time or people spend a lot more money. I don't know. I just feel like it's a big part of our culture, and I don't know if that's the same in other countries. And since you traveled, what would you say?
Okay, so I would say that I just got back is this whole phenomenon, and I think it started around about 8 years ago actually, which was when people you ask people questions and they just respond, "Oh, I just got back. Do you know how much this is? Oh, I don't know. I just got back. Or where do you stay? Oh, I just literally it was almost this sense of people wanted to boast of the fact that they didn't live in Nigeria and they just got back. And then because of the fact that many Nigerians go abroad for studies, right? And they go abroad for their working and they tend to return during the Christmas periods. We just kind of started saying that when they came back, the IJGBs are coming back. And I
Right.
know I used to be part of one of them, but now I refer to them as they, right? Because now I'm
Right.
here, I'm not coming
Right.
back. But you're just that sort of, when someone comes into the city or starts to speak a certain way or just starts to act in a certain way, you just, that's an IJGB, just leave them alone. They haven't yet acclimatized. Now, to
Right.
what extent is this a Nigerian phenomenon? I would say people tend to go back home for Christmas, right? Part of one
Right.
of the things, Christmas, there's this Christmas song, Driving Home for Christmas. I
Right.
would say it's also because of our population. There's a huge Nigerian population. But I would
Mm.
say that something else that really tied into it is that sense of the music. So the music industry,
Mm.
tend to then throw their festivals or their performances, their concerts during the December period. And that has also really acted as a pull factor to attract people to, if you're coming to Nigeria and you're going to see your family or you're going to see your friends,
Right.
there's a certain sense of you can also then come in and experience some of the concerts. To what extent is this a non-Nigerian phenomenon? I do know of some West Africans and East Africans and Southern African people coming into town for that, but it's
Mm.
really more visiting their friends, and it's not really, I would say, it's not like a whole big tourism event, like for example having the Mardi Gras or people going all the way for the carnival in Trinidad. It's not to that extent at all,
Mm.
not yet.
And that makes sense, actually, that this is not a tourism effort of some sort or tourism activity, or I don't even know what the word is. This is just people coming back home. However, is it possible to kind of uh, what's the word that I'm trying to, okay, can we encourage these travelers to maybe share more positive stories so that we can leverage on that for our tourism efforts? I don't know if that's the word, because I feel like, people come home and they just come home and they don't really talk about some of these things that they do, because you're right, it's not like people come home and they go to their house, which is where, if you're watching a Hallmark movie, that's what it seems like. People just gather in their homes. But here we go out, we go everywhere. There's a concert, maybe five, that you're going to, that you've planned around this. There's weddings, there's all of this in of themselves. They're not like a Mardi Gras, like you're saying, where people are coming from all over the world to come in. But could we leverage it, I guess, is the question. Leverage it
The answer
better.
is that we absolutely can and we should. Will we is the question. I think that's also the next step, right?
Mm,
And some of the work that we
okay.
do with government is this sense of who bell the cat, right? Is it a government thing or is it a private sector thing? Right now, what's happening
Mm,
strongly private sector led is individuals. But again, the
right.
force that we need needs to be stronger and collective. But I would say that government is important, but I would say that there's so much we can also do as the private sector led initiatives, which is really to
Right.
organize ourselves better, structure it better.
Right.
The challenge, though, I would say, of having IJGBs come back to Nigeria for tourism in December is that because they also want to see their family, they want to do things with their family, you really only have a short window. And so,
Mm,
what is really happening now is that we're saying that could we expand the tourism calendar a bit wider beyond
okay.
just that whole Christmas arrival period? Because then when
Right.
people go back, it's like, what happens? And I do know that within the arts and cultural and creative industry space, they've been doing quite a bit in terms of like the fashion week, in terms of the art x festival, etc. So moving it kind of back up a bit, so November and October, because then some people that don't want to spend Christmas in Nigeria can come for those experiences, and then they can also leave after that without, you don't want people not to be able to come to Nigeria for a festival because it falls within the Christmas week, because that's also going to affect other people that wanted to spend time with their family outside of Nigeria. And so
Mm,
I would say that there's still so much opportunity. I still do quite a lot of travel for work and I see the opportunity. But what is lacking, although that's changing, is this whole concerted systemic approach to say, okay, how do we work with visas? How do we work at
right.
the airports? How does all of this flow beautifully? And what you also said about perception, how do we really shape how Nigeria is perceived from an international and regional market?
Yeah. And you've brought up so many questions in my head, but let me start with one, which is the idea that, that perception that you just spoke about. I feel like it's very interesting that I continue to see more non-Nigerians be the one to promote Nigeria, right? Like there's this popular guy who I guess does like local street foods. I don't know if he's married to a Nigerian, but like he's in Nigeria all the time. He's the one, going to not just, and I think that's one thing we need to talk about, the idea that when people think of Nigeria, they think of Lagos and maybe Abuja, and that's about it, right? And so even when we're talking about this IJGB effect, that's where it's concentrated in. That's where then the locals are complaining about traffic, because even if you wanted to continue to encourage more activities or more well-planned thoughts around that, without dealing with that traffic situation, for example, I don't know if we can ever, succeed. But that's because it only seems to be in one location. So I guess two questions. What is it that we are not able to recognize in the opportunities that Nigeria presents that other countries, that other nationalities can see? And is it, again, there's only so much education we can do around trying to encourage people to continue to talk about Nigeria or continue to promote Nigeria. Is it an issue of the government, or is it just, like you said, maybe education that we need to do? That's one. And then two, the idea that if we don't deal with some of these infrastructures or infrastructural problem, or taking it away from the bigger cities, how can we ever promote tourism in Nigeria? Did I make sense?
Yes, you make sense, and I think they're great questions. And I would say that, like any industry that is in its developmental phase, it's important to also not ask it to do too much. I have to say, in terms of, so like, for example, if most people think of, England, it's UK. It's London. If most people think of America, it's New York, right? So there's that capital city effect, right, that happens.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that other things do not happen, right? It's again, how
Right.
do we showcase this? And I don't live in Lagos anymore. I used to live in Lagos, then I moved to Abuja, and now I'm in Ibadan, right? And it's that sense of when you go outside of these places, you realize that, okay, actually Nigeria is so much wider, so much vaster. The cultures are so different. I did some work in Onitsha and in Makurdi, right? And just as you go from different parts, just different parts of the country, you then realize that, gosh, we are such a beautiful country and we have so much to offer. And I think that needs to, again, come back into the system, right? Where people know that, okay, I come into Lagos and then I move to here and then I can do this and this is what's available. And I don't need to know 200 people or know everybody, and all the things that I need to navigate by myself are available to me. So, for example, I'm going to Tanzania, right, for work. And I'm going to Dar es Salaam, I'm going to Zanzibar, I'm going to Arusha, and I don't need to know anybody. I know that once I get to the airport, I get into this, I look for hotels, I know that it's great service, I can find the attractions that exist. It's easy, right? Tanzania has really helped itself in its design as a three destination. So
Right.
in the sense that you can arrive in Dar, or you can arrive in Arusha, they would have international airport, or even those three cities have international airports, right? And you can then go from Zanzibar easily to Dar es Salaam, easily to Arusha. And I would say that those are examples we need to start to learn. Like, what are our three cities, or what are our four cities that are connected, that people can literally explore and navigate? The storytelling is really missing. I know there's quite a lot of activity among the young people, right? But again, it's like, it's not a cohesive story. It's like, visit it and do what? Visit it for what reason? And so the one-on-one examples we see, it's kind of adventure tourism. You have this person, and I know the person you're talking about, who just goes around, explores street food, documents it. But it's also the point that a prophet isn't appreciated in their own environment. Sometimes it takes other eyes and other perspectives to see what we don't see. And so I think I encourage all of that. And it's the sense of, okay, how do we move this and really systematize what it is that we're offering? So that's one. The second part, in terms of infrastructure, and it's interesting. I'm doing some work with this. Actually, I'm working in two states at the moment, but one of the states, and they want to do all these tourism things. And I'm like, okay, what is your urban regeneration plan? Because if you're trying to bring all these people into your city, your residents are not going to be happy, right? Because it's going to have all of these effects. How are you expanding transport offerings? You're close to water. How are you looking at water transportation? Are you thinking about long-term, rail? What is the plan now? You can't say you want to have 200,000 people come into your city over the next 10, 15, 20 years, right? And you're not planning for them now, right? And when I ask that question, they look at me like, gosh. And I think that's something that I find quite fascinating about tourism, just the sense that it's so interconnected with other sectors. What are you doing with education? Because who's going to work in these places that you're building, right? You have to already start that. You have to start training them. They have to understand hospitality. They have to understand tourism. What are you doing in terms of making your city or state attractive from an ease of doing business? Because you want investors to also come in to invest. You're not going to build everything as a government. You need to attract people. So my point is, infrastructure, the hard and the soft, all need to be part of this plan. in terms of
Right.
designing and developing a destination.
Right. And you just again, sorry, I have questions, but like you're just telling me so much things because like we're talking even some of this so-called physical infrastructure, right? But to your point, digital infrastructure is so important, and I don't know that Nigeria is thinking about that, and maybe you can shed some light because I mean, to your point, I can go on Google and go to most countries and figure out exactly if this is working, this is, if this is available, get an update. Okay, so let me give you an example. I am a coffee person. Like, I love coffee and I need coffee to exist, right? And I remember every time I come home every year, it's like you're trying to figure out if that place that even was last year existed, and there's no way for you to find it online. And then you can't tell online, for example, if they have almond milk, because I'm lactose intolerant and I can't drink regular coffee, or drink coffee with regular milk if they have it. So oftentimes I have to now then call and see if they have it. And then the idea that if I went on Starbucks app, I can tell if maybe they ran out of almond milk that day, because they'll tell me not available. So then you can even go there because they sell almond milk, and then then you get there and they tell you it's not available. So it's like that digital infrastructure part is a big part of it for people to be able to make their own decisions really quickly. And I don't know. I guess my question is, what is Nigeria doing about this? And if not from a government perspective, what should the individual organizations, that especially get people to come in, regardless, right? Especially people who will be coming in from out of town and would want their services. What should they be doing? How can they make that a priority?
I love this because we're actually doing something about it. We're going to announce it very soon. It's a
Yay.
digital, it's a tourist map. Because it's
Okay.
that sense of if someone comes to Lagos and you don't know someone, where do you go? Who
Mm,
do you talk to? How do you know what time they're open, who to contact, where to go, etc. And so the idea is that this is, and I was looking around because I was trying to see if I had the prototype on my desk here, but I
mm,
don't. It's in my office in Lagos. But it's that sense of you can actually use a paper map, right? But then
right.
you're also going to have it online. So there's going to be a digital version, and then there's going to be an interactive app version. So you can then say, oh, these restaurants are on here. This is what they offer. This, like you said, this coffee shop, this cafes, this libraries, this. I want to go to this attraction. What do they have? So what we've done is we've looked at it. That is it child friendly? Is it family
Mm,
friendly?
mm,
Does it help people? What is the accessibility like
right.
for people with disabilities, for people that are elderly with mobility challenges? Is it something that is good for solo travelers, etc.? So we've appraised the destinations in Lagos. Lagos is where we're starting it with. And then the idea is that people can self-navigate with this, and then over time we'll then have online, like I said, and app versions. And I honestly think that more of these interventions need to happen without necessarily waiting for government. So it's important that we work with government, of course, and it's important that
Mm,
government is kept aware of these things. But if you look around the world, right, the map of London, tourist map of London is not by government, right? The
mm,
tourist map in New York, right? I have
mm,
different samples because I buy them. I have different, Florence, Edinburgh, etc., China, Malaysia. It's all by public and by private sector
mm,
organizations, right? But it's good to do it to help government. One thing I will say, I think that there's something about us Nigerians that I haven't seen anywhere else, is that for everything we think we need to do, for some reason it's government, right? And I think we need
mm,
to move ourselves from that, was what the past where the state was very strong, right?
right.
And there's quite a lot of decentralization happening. And I would say that more of us can be part of the change, working with government or even bringing ideas to government, but not necessarily waiting for government to be the initiator, implementer of everything, of everything that we need.
I agree 120%. I will ask you though, but policies, if the policies do not work for you, I think maybe there's that fear of you start something and then some government policy that you're not aware of, even in general, is the one thing that can then, hamper your business. And I don't know if that's just a result of us needing to then educate ourselves on the policies enough to again understand what the challenges could potentially be, or then to, like you said, work with the government. However, I do think that might be a big part of it, that the policies in Nigeria, at least that's what I hear from some of the other like non-tourism businesses in Nigeria, and I don't know if maybe the policies are not as broad with tourism. What would you say?
Oh, I would say that policies change everywhere around the world, right? That's just the nature of policy. The idea is that, in fact, sometimes by the time a policy is being enacted, right, it's already redundant and there's a work in progress to do another one. I know this because I used to do a lot of work as a policy analyst, and in my previous role, a long time ago, did a lot of work with public-private partnerships. By the time you're writing this to say this is what it is, it's something different, right? But I would say that something that I would say that I keep telling younger people, that even, I don't know if we're still young people, we're getting
We're
old.
young,
So
we're young. I'm very young.
2000 was 24 years ago. Anyway, so what I keep saying is that we also need to develop our political intelligence, in the sense that when you have to be close to government. They should be calling you when they want to change policy. You should be the one advising and informing on what type of policies they need. That's the role that we do. That's the role that I do, right? And I think that for, in any industry you find yourself, in any sector you find yourself, you don't want to be the person that is always complaining and criticizing. You want to be the person that is providing constructive criticism, but also providing solutions. And I think that that's very important. And so what I would say in this policy framework, right, some of the work we do is working on master plans. The master plans then shape the policies, then shape the agencies, then shape the agenda. Are you telling me that what I write now, by the time it's been implemented 2-3 years time, we'll need to update it again, right? And it's just that sense of constantly being agile, constantly staying at the front line and preferring solutions. A lot of what I do is, it's not even for my benefit as Adun Okupe or for Red Clay. It's for the industry. I will go to the ministry and say, this is what the industry needs. And it's not, I literally would not benefit. I do it as a volunteer. But what it does is it also helps me to know what's going on, and it helps me to be the conduit to what's happening with my peers. And I remember at the time the commissioner said, you actually come to us with solutions. You're not coming to us with problems. You're coming to us with solutions. So of course, when they want to do something, they'll call. What do you think of this? How do you think we can change this? How do you think we can do this better? I honestly think that positioning is very important. I'm not saying that, I'm not saying you have to be a politician, because I think a lot of us think, anything politics, I don't want to be part of it. But guess what? You are part of it, because you have to pay your taxes, you have to be a citizen, you have to be all of these things. So why not be contributing to how it's shaped? Another part that I would say is, I'm part of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. It's an NGO about how do we represent, Nigeria's different industries and economies. And again, through that volunteering, worked recently on how do you integrate sustainability throughout the national tourism policy. And, I led that working committee, and we had so many different people volunteer at that time to work on that. That's how you influence policy. Do you get it? So you can see my passion. So I don't think we always need to, wait.
No, I agree. And, I mean, I think I'll talk to you after this to see how I can get involved in some of these things, because, the challenge sometimes is when you prefer a solution or prefer an idea, like you're saying, people come back with you with, in Nigeria, I cannot work with this. Like, I mean, I had someone tell me, like, what are you trying to do? Like, what are you, like, you think you're trying to solve problems and Nigeria will frustrate you. And in some ways, it has been frustrating, call it spade a spade. But, I think it's great to hear more people like you who are more positive about things than people who are, more negative about it. And so it literally brings me to my next question, which is, how can we shift the focus from potential risk to concrete economic benefit of tourism in Africa? Because again, thinking about some of these more established tourism venues, we see some effects to the local population, right? We see some negative effects to the climate and things like that, right? And, again, we were already talking about traffic in at least the major hub, which is Lagos right now. But the inverse of that is we hear so much of insecurity in Nigeria in general. And so we're trying to promote tourism, but we've not dealt with our bad roads. We've not dealt with bad, internet. We've not dealt with security issues. So how do we, kind of shift our focus from those risks and all these issues to concrete economic benefits for the individuals as well as, the nation, and even not just Nigeria, obviously, but Africa?
Okay, just to say before your question is that, you mentioned that Nigeria will frustrate you. I have to tell you, at the time I was working, I remember this is like 10 years ago when I was my PhD, right? I think so. And this was when we were thinking about how we were going to have another runway at Heathrow. And so a lot of the citizens were campaigning, and airlines were campaigning. And I remember one of the CEOs of one of the airlines telling me the work they'd had to do over so many years. And his analogy was this from this Greek mythology called Sisyphus, which is like you're constantly rolling a rock uphill. Just think of what that means, right? I would say this is not Nigeria, right? So just to let you know that in any other part of the world as well, policy, things. Are you telling me America is frustrating right now? Are you telling me that the United Kingdom is frustrating? My point is, it's just choose your frustration. Just choose the type of frustration that you want. So I would say that that's that one. And it's not like I think I'm a Pollyanna or that, okay, it's not hard. But for me, I also say that in all these other parts of the world, if you read Dickens' books, Oliver Twist, right? The Victorian era wasn't very long ago, where there used to be, orphanages that were very, very, very bad conditions, where they used to throw. My point is, development is a journey. We just happen to be at this part of our journey, but we will get to what development ought to look for us. And then bringing that back into things, we will get there. But the only way we will get there is if more of us contribute to it. No one is going to come and do it for us. We have to be the ones to do it ourselves. So I think when you then piggyback that in terms of then how do we work to say what are the benefits of tourism, what are the benefits of the development, and how do we ensure that its effects on the communities and its impact is positive while mitigating low impact. And I would say that again, if anything you get from this conversation is systems, tourism systems. It's a systematic approach. A long time ago, I used to teach social impacts of tourism, actually. And it's the same that there will always be impacts of any activity. You want to ensure that the positive ones are amplified, and you want to ensure that the negative ones are reduced. That being said, right, I think it's also the awareness and clarity that when you're growing something, you want to, and that's what I tell people here, they want to make Lagos the next Dubai, the next Bahamas, the next whatever. And I'm like, no, Lagos has to be the next Lagos. You can only compete with yourself because you have your own unique selling point. And you need to understand what that is. You're not trying to be anything else. You can learn from other parts of the world, but you must authentically be true to who you are. Otherwise, what is your product? What's your tourism product? So that by the side. Now, coming to things around insecurity, the world is insecure right now. Actually, to be honest, I have more fear taking my child to school in the US than taking my child to school in Nigeria. Just because I know the chances that if I have a child that is black, they're going to be shot or police is going to do something to them. Whereas here, it's not to that extent. Now, what that means, and that's not to reduce the fact that it's important, is that there must be a deliberate policy that people understand and feel that the country takes security seriously. And I think that's the difference. Why? I was in France I was literally at the point just the day, I was in Nice, just the day before the terrorist attack that happened in Nice a few years ago. And I literally, once I saw the pictures, I like a lot of people were like, Adun, are you still in Nice? Because that was where I was taking my pictures from. But guess what? People still flocked to Nice the next day, the next week, the next month, because what happened was the president had made an announcement. And the messaging was actually that we must travel to make sure that the terrorists do not win, right? So again, it's that shaping of this has happened. We know it's happened, but if we don't travel, then they have won. And I would say it's taking that authoritative position to show that there is systems in place. There are systems in place that the police force, the security force. I'm not saying those things should not be invested in. Of course, invest in it, and also ensure that if there are instances of emergency or of insecurity, people know where to go and people know that they will be attended to. So again, it's the police system, right? Ensuring that the policing system for the tourist is well covered. It's not like you go to the police station and then you're going to have to deal with so many other things that are just like, good, forget about it. It's giving people that assurance that they will be safe and secure. And if something does happen, that the perpetrators will not get away with it and that those people will be punished. And I have to say that it's a challenge around the world as well. You see what's happening with police crime in the US, right? Don't always see that the perpetrators are held to account. You see what's happening with knife crime, gun crime. That doesn't mean it's fine. It just means that let's come together to say, how can we work best for us? From the states that I have worked with, and I'm just being honest, I can see a very strong concerted approach to security. And it's also that sense of what are the right strategies. I have quite a few books that some of the IGs of police have given me because they're like, this is the book that we need to look at how we can change, policing in Nigeria. And there are different mixtures. You have the state police, you have the community policing, you have the local policing. And it's that blend to say, okay, what can really work that other places can also then incorporate. And so, yeah, the journey keeps pushing. We're moving.
Awesome. So from what I'm hearing, it's a multi-pronged approach. It's systems that need to be put in place. And it's just going to take time. However, there is one sector that I feel like in tourism is not really emphasized enough, which is healthcare. Right? Because again, what you just described, just say, for example, for whatever reason, even sometimes natural disasters happen, right? And you're there in the country and there's an emergency of some sort. I don't know that Nigeria, and I keep using Nigeria, even though I really mean Africa for all of these things for the most part, because, I see Nigeria as a big part of Africa, but I see that Africa needs to be one, or at least better in being more united in this growth that we need to get to, right, in this development that we need to get to. But anyways, I'm saying that I don't know that we have a system in place that can make me feel safe, at least me, I'll speak for myself, if such an emergency were to occur, that I could find the right services, that I could find, help. It's clear, it's well defined, that kind of thing. Especially, again, as a Nigerian, knowing that, if you don't pay for certain services, you can't even get seen by the doctor. And then two, the big thing about brain drain that is occurring because a lot of people are jackpotting, as we call it, which is leaving the country. So what are the efforts being done, or are there conversations around, is healthcare even considered a part and parcel of tourism in Nigeria and Africa in your work so far?
Absolutely. Part of what is fascinating about tourism is that, so yes, I'm an economist, but it's again, when we advise the states or government or even investors, because I do a lot of work with investors as well, is that where should you allocate these your scarce resources to? There's so much you can do. And last week I was in another state, and part of it is they want to do tourism, right? And it was that sense of, what happens in an emergency, what's security, what's healthcare, what's all of these things. And they're doing so much work already. So part of our tourist map in Lagos, for example, we're partnering with an insurance company to offer like health insurance. We're working with hospitals in Lagos to offer at different levels, at different strata, you can have health insurance as a tourist. So you know that if and when something does happen, you don't even have to start calling people. Just go here, call this person, call this number, go to this hospital, and you can be seen. The other part is, this is a couple of years ago, we did this West Africa Tourism Roundtable series, so Red Clay. And one of our sessions was actually looking at safety and security. And again, health is one of them. And so the person that we actually got to speak with us, Tago Azubike, used to be the Chief Medical Director for Gold Cross Lagoon Hospital. And so just to let you know that it's so connected. And so he was speaking, he's now with Afrexim Bank, talking about the strategies that they're using to improve the state of healthcare across the continent, because it's not just for tourists, right? It's to ensure that across the continent, residents and visitors have access to good health care. That said, I would say that if I did get ill in the States now, I don't think anybody will see me if I don't pay or if I don't have insurance, will they?
Yes, actually, emergency room, you get first, and yes, you will deal with payment later, but it's first, like, you first get seen and treated before they ask any questions.
Okay, because what I usually hear is that you have to pay so much, and the bill. We're always told about the bill that comes afterwards. We're not necessarily
afterwards is a different issue, but at least you get seen and you get treated. Like no matter what, like like if you have to have a surgery, whatever, they will go to the extent to keep you alive first, and then you can deal with payments all the rest of your life.
So thank you for that, and I stand corrected. And so part of what we're trying to do as well here with this health insurance is to say that for those that have it, at least you're going to be treated first, and to ensure that you can be treated first. Now, that doesn't mean that that's the best response. Of course, the best response is that anybody that goes into a hospital or clinic can get treatment, and that's a big challenge. That's a challenge that the government is really trying to work with, because again, you're only as strong as your weakest people, right? And if you don't ensure that there are enough social safety nets to cover those that cannot afford certain things, then how do you say that you're a strong or growing or developing country? So to your other question, which is to do with the jackpot syndrome. Because the thing is this, Nigeria are 200 million people, and around the I went to Kigali for a conference, and I was talking to some Chinese people, right? And they had come from Beijing. I was talking about jackpot. He's like, do you know the brain drain that China deals with? Like they've actually incorporated it into their strategy. Do you know the brain drain that even America, right? A lot of people moved from Ireland, moved from England, moved from Italy. So again, the point is migration is part of it's just part of humanity, right? Human beings will always move to where opportunities abound for them, right? Now, some people have a fantastic time while they're there, some people don't, but I think it's important that people should be allowed to flow as they want and as they wish. What I do know is that to the extent of the training and the development, right, is also the sense of how are we also contributing to the center? How are we bringing people back, right? What are the strategies to bring people back? We can't ask them to do that for altruistic means, particularly if you haven't funded their education and then you want them to stay, right? So I know the government now is looking at strategies to say, okay, you know what, we'll support your education up until this level. We'll also support you going to internationally for a couple of years to get experience, and then you can come back. If you don't come back, perhaps there's a bond or there's something. I know that they had that in, I think it was Thailand or Malaysia or Taiwan and probably even China some time ago. But brain drain is something that, it's going to happen always, because when you have any part of that you have better opportunities, people will want to move there. Now, for me, my own focus is those that are here for whatever reason, those that are staying here, which there are still so many of us. There are 200 million Nigerians. We're forecast to be about 400 million by 2050, where there's a lot of us. So we actually need more people to go, right? We need more people to go, because there are also benefits that the country is getting from this: diaspora returns, earnings coming back, all of these things coming back, right? But it's the sense of how do we, again, what is the strategy around all of that to ensure that that flow happens organically, but that it also improves and benefits those that are here. So for me, what I tell students, people that are here, is that, you know what, the world offers you so many opportunities, which you can choose to take, or you can also choose to contribute it here. I have gone abroad. I've lived abroad for, about 15, 16 years, and I chose to come back because for me, I feel like I don't want to be abroad complaining about Nigeria. I think that it's important that I'm part of the change in whatever capacity that I can. I don't believe everybody has that calling or should have that calling. And to those that don't, I don't think they should be burdened by it, right? And I think it's that sense of when it's built and it's fine, people will come. I remember in I think it was 2011, 2012, just after the global credit crunch, a lot of Nigerians moved back to contribute. A lot of Ghanaians moved back, right? And so again, if we make it appealing and attractive, it's not even just about financial alone. People do want to help. So what are we doing to make this place a better place? You can't stop people from going, but you can attract them to come back.
Awesome. No, so you're saying we're 200 million. I don't know. I'm a public health expert, whatever you want to call it, right? And I still feel like we don't actually have the census that tells us this. And again, I think this might also fit into tourism, this idea of an actual idea of the number, like a real sense of the number. Do you think that we are equipped to be able to carry out that function? Because I think that might help us understand really and truly, because I say it all the time, I quote it all the time, because that's what I have, even though I don't really truly believe it, that over 50% of our population is young, so 18 to 25, right? I think is the number that we've been using. And I can imagine that 18 to 25, and I've probably been saying this for the past maybe 5 years now, they're getting closer to their 30s, and we're not maximizing, them, because, again, all of the education, all of the research, all of the things that we could equip them with to become better leaders, better citizens, and all of that. So again, are we well aligned to carry out that function, to truly know what our number is, and be able to leverage on that information to help tourism activities or tourism industry in Nigeria?
I think the answer, well, I don't think the answer to that is yes. We need more data. You need to make evidence-based decisions. You can't make decisions by, I don't know what, by guesswork. It's important that your decisions are based on some sort of evidence and some sort of data. Now, can Nigeria do that same sort? Of course we can. Have you seen the elections? Have you seen how the elections, they get to everywhere? The ballot papers get everywhere, every nook and cranny. In fact, I was actually invited to speak as part of the other job that I do, which is Sahara Center, which is a think tank to amplify African solutions for African societies. to talk about census really, and how do we actually work with census. So it was interesting speaking to different experts that work within the census, and it was that there was actually strategies and ideas to think of, because we're overdue another census, and one was
Right.
meant to actually happen, but because of the elections and censuses are political, we want to
Right.
reduce some of that exposure. But a beautiful way would have been to do it when we were doing, when we were doing the ballot, because you can literally say how
Mm,
many people are here, and then give
right.
the ballot papers, and that way you tick those boxes. But that didn't happen
Right.
because of, like I mentioned, politics. But there are also, new and improved strategies of how censuses are being done around the world that we can learn from, and you don't have to always do it every, going up by paper, etc. So it comes back to that sense of how are we moving as a digital country? Because there are places where you can actually capture who exists and where. And if we had, again, a centralized database, right, you can tell when people are born, their details when they go to school, it's constantly being updated so that you can have something, I think, like the French system, that you don't have to always do a census. You really need to
Right.
understand how your population is growing, how it's growing in terms of birth rate, and how it's declining in terms of death rate, and have this kind of view of where people are flowing as they go along. We'll get there. I know we will. We have to get there, right?
Amen.
But I think it's also how do we. So for me in tourism, part of my own little work is saying I just want the ministries to be talking to each other. I want that when people come to the airport
Mm,
and go to the destination and go to the hotel,
mm,
all of that data is being captured. Not that because we're capturing data, but the data isn't speaking to anybody. It's just captured and it's static. And so when it's static,
mm,
it's redundant. So we want to
right.
know when people come into the airport, are they local? Are they international? Are they what? Where do they go? Where do they stay?
Mm,
And then how long do they go for? What attractions they visit? When do they leave? What was the experience like? So from our own little industry, that's kind of the area we're trying to say, can we capture some of that data so that we can really start to get a sense of what people like about the country, what people
right.
feel about the country. Yeah.
I have so many questions, but I'm really trying to stick to time in this new season. But okay, I know, and I've seen your write up about how Nigeria hasn't, maybe not Nigeria, but tourism in general has to think through about people with disabilities and making sure that's a focus in Africa. And I don't really want to because people can go and read what you have to say. I know you've talked about it a lot, but I think that there's obvious physical disabilities, and then there's mental disabilities, for lack of a better term, right? So again, maybe like kids with autism who might be acting out at a hotel, and how hotel staff might deal with that. So I'm trying to link this idea of mental disability with our customer service in Africa, because customer service in Africa, and I think you kind of mentioned it when you were talking about soft skill, is still the biggest issue. I think it's still possibly the biggest barrier to achieving anything successful in tourism in Africa. And I don't know how we combat that. So if you have anything to say about, what we can do as far as mental disabilities, promotes, education or whatever we need to do around that in Africa, so we can better help our citizens who have that, but also tying that to the idea of customer service. What are we going to do about customer service in Africa?
So when I think of people with disabilities, right? So we're talking people with physical disabilities, and also I guess neurodivergent persons, right? Because people
Exactly.
are at different places within the spectrum, and there are
Right.
different types of diversity in that regard. And I think it's a global issue. It's not a Nigerian issue. It's a global
Yeah,
issue. And
absolutely.
again, like I mentioned, the beautiful thing about tourism is because you have to deal with so many different target demographics, you have to kind of almost know. So I'm not an expert in this at all, but I've
Right.
had to kind of look at what the standards say, in terms of what should the minimum provisions be, and how should we move the needle there. So we're actually in talks with different organizations that are global, that to say how do we start driving stronger policies, but also working with like hotels. I went somewhere the other day and I was telling them, they had this wheelchair ramp, and I'm like, this your wheelchair ramp is too steep.
Mm,
I don't even use a wheelchair, but from seeing it, I can see that if I had to be on a wheelchair, it's
right.
literally dead. And so they're like, okay, now thank you, Adun. We're going to call a structural engineer to see how we can design a better sloped. So my point is, people are trying, they just don't sometimes just even know. And it's that sense of, if they do not know, can we accuse them of not doing something? People would tell them. So I put it to you as a public sector expert. Perhaps this is something that you might want to contribute to the agenda, because again, they're not seen again. So at Sahara Center, actually, one of the projects we're working on is how we can include more people with disabilities within the waste management ecosystem as a way of empowering them, because they're not seen, and we don't want just to see these people. See these people, it's like, actually, if they're incorporated in, they earn revenue, they empower, then you see them. Because you go to the banks, you go to all these different places, and even if you do a walkthrough, you see the have to come in, and I'm like, okay, yes, but then you still have to climb the stairs to see this person. You've forgotten that this needs to be done. And so it's closing all those gaps, I would say, that needs to be done. Now, moving that to customer service, actually, I went to Amsterdam for a conference, and I was at a hotel, and I had a suitcase, right? And this hotel, the access to get to it had like 4 steps or 6. And I was like, gosh, this is not easy for me to carry. Like, what if I was a person with disabilities? And the receptionist was like, what did she even call them? She said I can't remember the phrase. It was one of these phrases that you are not supposed to use. That even what was it? It will come to me, and I'll tell you what it was. But it was really bad. It was very derogatory. And I was like, gosh, I wanted to say, how are you in Netherlands and you haven't been trained on what to say for people with disabilities? I used to say that customer service is an issue around the world. In fact, at the World Travel and Tourism Council summit that we had in Kigali, I asked this question about people with disabilities, because it was mostly the CEOs of hotels, airports, some airlines and tourism destinations from around the world, ministers, etc. And I remember the CEO of Accor responded to say that they had one blind person in their Accor in Paris who was working, which he used that as a good example. But I'm like, if you look at one person, because for me, it's not enough to say we want to include people with disabilities as tourists. They should also be working in the industry. Our industry is, provides flexible labor, casual labor, all of these things that work with people with neurodiversity, that work with people with disabilities, because you don't have to work 9 to 5 every day. You don't even always have to be at a location. And it was just interesting that was the example that he could give one, right? And I'm hoping that we start to expand that. But to answer the customer service point, part of the issue with tourism is that it's very lowly paid. People see it as a stopgap to their long-term jobs or career paths. And so what we have to do is that as an industry, we need to attract better talent. We need to pay people better. We just let them see how industry can shape lives and destinations, not as the, carrot and stick type of thing, but really that sense of you're trying to build a spirit of hospitality. Now, some cultures do that is a bit easier than others. So if I'm in Nigeria, I know Benue, Jos, Uyo, Akwa Ibom, right? They're just very hospitable. But then I also know that in London, Londoners are not hospitable. But when I go to London, I stay in a hotel and I go to a restaurant, I expect good service. And I get it because that person knows that if they don't deliver that service, they're out. So I also think it needs to be clarity. In New York, are you joking? Okay, well, you have the tip culture in the States. But still, right? In Copenhagen, like my point is, even places that are, even in Japan, right, that are very isolationist in terms of they're not warm, they have to provide you a good service because they work in the industry. And so it's that level and that minimum acceptable level of service quality that we have to work towards developing in our people, basically.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Because it's not like, it's not there's never bad customer service anywhere else in the world. I've traveled to a few places as well. However, I think you bring up a good point, which is going to be my next question, which is the idea that there are no maybe I should say there are no, but like, it doesn't often feel like you see the consequences of some of these actions and or some of these bad behavior. And I wonder to what extent we can, because on the one hand, like you said, it's already an industry where people maybe are not getting paid properly. So you don't want them to lose their jobs. But as far as like the organization itself, so an example, my uncle and aunt were in Nigeria this holiday, Airbnb that they, scheduled, basically they gave them a different place than one was shown on the, what they had shown them, because apparently they had given I guess maybe the place was still being occupied. They hadn't cleaned the place properly. They hadn't this, they hadn't that. And, one of the things my uncle was like, they just felt like they couldn't really fight because they couldn't have gotten their money back. And I'm like, what do you mean you couldn't have gotten your money back? Now, maybe it's because Airbnb might work different, there versus in the States where like you literally can just put it on the news and Airbnb will pay you your money back. But if there's no such consequences in Nigeria, or there's nothing you can do to get people, when people are not doing the right thing, then how are we going to, again, go from there? Because now he's told me that story. He's told many people that story, right? It continues to help people see Nigeria and or Africa in a bad light. And we need to be able to show that there are actions and people do better when they're called out on those kind of things. And I don't know how we educate maybe the organizations or call out the organizations in being able to accept those consequences and do the right thing. Am I making sense?
You're making sense. Well, first of all, I'll say Airbnb is a global organization. So Airbnb in Nigeria is the same as Airbnb anywhere else in the world. So I think there could have been a step to take. Yeah, it's not a Nigerian company. Right. There could have been steps to take to report it and to escalate it appropriately. I know around the world, people always complain about, what I saw versus what I got, right? The only difference is because of the fact that Nigeria, in a way, we're starting on our wrong foot. It's almost like we're in this defensive position. But the fact that someone has a horrible Airbnb experience in London doesn't stop people going to London, right? And actually, they escalate it. So I say this a lot because I've had horrible Airbnb experiences. Not in like, I've been pickpocketed. The only place I've been pickpocketed in the world was in Copenhagen, which is supposedly the safest place, right?
What?
In Denmark.
Wow.
That was it. I had to get a new passport. I had to get new money. I had to get everything. I had to go to the police. Yes, I was pickpocketed in Denmark. Can you imagine? My point is, what are the stories that come out? How do we also show these stories? You're not going to hear that story, right? Because I didn't go online to start. I don't do that. 1, 2. Even if I do that, it's like it's drowned in the voice of so many. But of course, because it's Nigeria, the challenge is there's no recourse to many of these things. And I have a friend that works in consumer protection, right? And it's an uphill battle because sometimes I'm always like, what are you guys doing for tourism? And she's like, we're doing things with fake goods, with fake medicine. Not that tourism isn't important, but there's just so much. And I would say more of us, again, need to see how we can contribute to the public sector. Now, to answer the question of just this whole perception thing, it's really perception narrative, but it's also about perception marketing, right? And so we need to come up with the right strategies to really help define and shape the perception. You go to New York, are you joking? Because whenever I go to a new city or whenever I go to a city, I always like to go to where the wealthiest go and where the poorest go because I want to see the level of inequality. And you know what I'm talking about? When you go to some places in New York, they're literally like, what is this? Or you go to some places in Napoli, in Naples, and you're just like, gosh, Saleko is, I thought Saleko was bad. Like, Saleko is not sound like this, right? And you start to really, obviously not all the countries are like that. There are places like in Japan, even in Singapore, that the disparity is not as wide. But you really start to understand that actually, this issue is not an African issue alone. But that doesn't mean it's not important. So even if you go to Kenya, you go to different parts of Africa, you really start to say, how do we start to close the gap? And tourism, I think, can be one vehicle to close the gap because it has so much impact in terms of the number of jobs it provides, number of indirect impacts, because you think of food, for example, feeding people, hospitality, the food value chain, the food system, that's one. You think about the fashion system. So many systems interact with tourism. But I just think that we don't appreciate what tourism can be enough. And hopefully, when people listen to this podcast and read more and see more things, then they really start to appreciate how all of these things can come together to shape the experience. Because even for me, I'm always like, it's not about making Lagos nice for tourists. No, it's about making Lagos nice for residents and tourists. Because if it's nice for its residents, it will automatically be nice for its tourists. Yeah. It's a social development agenda that we're pushing here because it has to work across the board for everybody. Yeah. You're not going to create an island, everybody just flies in. No. That's not what tourism development is about. That's not how I understand it. And so that's one thing we are really working with them to say, don't do this. This is not what it is, where you all just fly somewhere, stay somewhere, and fly back. It's important to interact with the actual soul of the destination.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I have a question here. How can we ensure fair distribution of tourism benefits and prevent exploitation of local communities and resources? I think that fits exactly into what you were
I feel
trying to
like I've
say.
already
Yeah.
answered this, right?
No,
I think
exactly. You
it's
did.
about,
That's my point.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. It
Yeah.
really is about engaging the community more because it also solves this security problem. Because once the
Mm,
community sees that their livelihoods come from this activity,
yeah.
they'll be the police, they'll be the ones preventing crime. Because are you joking? We don't want people to stop coming here. We can see the benefits,
Yeah.
right? And it's really helping them to see that stakeholder engagement, stakeholder management.
Yeah. And I think, again, I'm just going back to Hallmark movies when you see them going back to some of those, like, very small towns where everybody knows everybody. And it brings up the question because it's something we say at church, right? Like, as the church grows bigger, we have to become smaller. And so we do things like, what is it called, groups, basically church in the community. And I feel like that's maybe how we might also think about these things with the local community, right? Because you're saying 200 million, we're going to get to 400 million. But if the more we grow, the more you don't know your neighbor, the more you start to have those, fairs and things like that. And I think if we can figure out how we can make the community smaller by having things that are cultural, or I don't know if this makes sense, but things that bring the community together. I think that might make a difference to what in what you're trying to say, in this idea that if I see it as a benefit, I'm going to take care of it. Does that make sense? I always ask
Absolutely,
that.
absolutely. No, it's really about saying that, and this is something the creative industries are trying to do. Really, is saying that how do we strengthen the soul of our communities? Because one thing about development is you create more isolation, you create
Hmm.
more gated communities, you create more soulless neighborhoods, and you want to reduce, you want to avoid that actually.
Right.
So how can we do that? And yeah, I completely agree with you.
All right. Two more questions. What are the emerging trends in African tourism or Nigerian tourism that we should be paying attention to?
I would say surprisingly, because some people are surprised when I say this. We had a hotel client that wanted to revamp their strategy, and so we were working with them and we told them that we need to look at wellness, and they're like wellness, and I was like,
Mm,
yes, like wellness, like yes, but wellness because there's a growing middle class, there's a growing upper middle class as well, but
right.
not only that, I think there's a growing appreciation for work-life balance, but
Hmm.
also self-care, and there's this growing sense of being closer to nature. And so I would say that the destinations in Africa that are savvy are the ones that are already incorporating that into their, we already have like ecotourism, right?
Right.
But this is wellness tourism to create that almost sense of escape and sense of rejuvenating with discovery. The other
Mm,
part that I would say is that this, and it connects again with resorts. People don't necessarily want to just travel nice resorts, stay there, sleep there, etc. But how are you creating, activities? How do you create
right.
interesting programs that people can come and say, okay, I'm doing this. It's almost like an educational, but it's experience led. So I'm learning more about wine tasting while I'm away for 1 week. So it's
Right.
really, oh, I'm learning more about languages. I'm learning more
Right.
about activities. I'm seeing
Mhm.
this, you know, so it's that wellness, but also then that sense of discovering yourself more as a person to become a better rounded person. So those are two, well, that's one and a half trends. I think the other thing that I would say that is that people should pay attention to for the continent is that yes, safaris are nice and safaris are good, but most destinations also realize that you need things that keep bringing people back. And so you need
Mm,
multiple tourism products. So if you
mm,
come to Nairobi or Kenya for safari this year, you can come another year for something along coffee plantation or tea or
mm,
flowers or etc.
mm,
And so it's that sense of really, really breaking down the stay, what it is that we offer, and being able to package it as multi-nodal experiences so that even if you can't cover everything once, there's something to return for and return to again and again and again.
awesome. Awesome. And actually, I said two more questions, but I have one more question. One thing that I'm curious about is this idea that, people are beginning to see, they're doing a lot of their DNA testing and they're trying to come back home and they're trying to come back to, where they think they were born, and, all of those stuff. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on how we can leverage on that.
Very good question. And Ghana really did a lot for the year of
Right.
return. But
Mm-hmm.
then I had asked them at the time, I said, after the year of return, what happens? Is every year going to be a year of return or is it just 1 year? So again, in terms of how we label and our strategies, it's important that we look at it for the long term. I still think places like India that have incredible India, Malaysia, truly Asia, visit Great Britain, timeless. I heart New York, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are the places that help us to come. back to them because you don't
Right.
have to change your reason for visiting. But that
Right.
being said, there is that quest now, and Wakanda was one of those, was one of the key factors in
Drivers.
that for people to
Mhm.
want to find out more about who they are, where they come from. And interestingly, I'm not sure how much I can disclose, but interestingly, there was an interesting project we're going to work on with some of these DNA testing organizations to say, how can we create this sense of, even visit, if you could localize where you're from to visit it and
Mm.
all of that.
Mm.
That's too far. Like, we're not there yet. I would
Right.
say that one way to leverage it is to pick up on what Ghana has done, year of return, to let people know that they can come back. And when I travel to Oshogo or other parts of outside the cities like towns, I usually meet African Americans visiting back, wanting to learn more, not necessarily because they come from that area, but because they think it's something of curiosity that they want to
Mm.
explore more. They want to learn more about Adire, they want to learn more about Oshun groves, etc.
Right.
So I would say that, again, going back to this information that we provide for people, letting them know that, if you're interested in ancestry, if you're interested in all of these elements, you can come back and see more of what our lives are and how our lives are. And I think I remember someone saying that for the first time in their lives, they've never been anywhere where being black was the majority,
Mm.
right? And then they came to Nigeria and it's like, wow, it all was like a mind shift because, gosh,
Mm.
I'm not a minority. In
Right.
fact, what is a minority, right? And it just changes that. And I think that can be very powerful and very transformational. So again, it's about how do we package it? People know they can do their DNA and they know that they can actually just need a tour operator and tour guide to help you package your tours, come as a group, explore, connect more, see more, see if there are family trees that exist, connect with them and go back. I think there's so much that the other part of tourism that I think is interesting, which is there's adventure tourism, but there are some people that also go for dark tourism. They like to visit like graveyards, sites, all of these things. My point is, people have different
Yeah.
interests, and it's almost
Yeah.
that thing of when you look for it, you will find it, and there are people that want to learn more about,
Shrines. Those kind of things. Yeah.
but yeah, but look at Mexico, right? Look at what Bubble 07 has done for the
Yeah.
festival, right?
Yeah. Day of the
Was
Dead.
it the
Yeah.
Day of the Dead? The Day of the
Yeah.
Dead. Exactly. My point is, let's not sleep on this. Let's not, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of money that goes on for this featuring,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
again, maybe if we're talking about how our festivals are featured or ceremonies
Yeah.
are featured, can be a strong pull factor for people. Don't
Yeah.
don't don't sleep on it. So
No, I agree, and that's my problem with Nigerian movie industry, for example, because I feel like, anyways, I've had this conversation many times. The idea that they show nonsense and make it more like, oh, we're just living the high life. When if you show the local things, people would be interested in local things. Which is again going back to that guy who does the adventure tourism. I like that word. In fact, funny enough, I had a question about ecotourism, but we already talked about it a little bit. But now adventure tourism and wellness tourism, that's just awesome. But yeah, no, I think that you make a very, very solid point. And the idea of tour operators, though, I again sometimes I know this maybe because me, I can just enter my own car and go if I'm in Nigeria. But do we have a tour operator industry kind of thing in Nigeria?
Oh yes, a lot of the
Oh,
conferences that people come in, a lot of international visitors to the country, they actually have tour guides, they have travel agencies. We trained with the state a couple of years ago, 150 tour guides, right? Some of
oh,
them
that's
still now work
awesome.
with this travel management. So yeah, there are. My point is, when you open it's almost like you open this Pandora's box. You then see that
Yeah.
there's a whole economy that is not perhaps as systematized as it
Mm.
could be, but it's there. So it's just really how
Mm.
do we also create these systems?
And how would somebody find that information, for example? Say I wanted to tell somebody to be coming to Nigeria and I'm not going to be there, but here's where you can get the information for a tour operator.
Yes,
I know, we know they fight now, but there's, maybe some or better unity. I don't know. And this was just a proposed idea. I heard somebody say it and I thought, it might be a good idea.
I think ideas are good and I think
Yeah.
ideas are welcome. I would say more than change the language for the continent, I think let's focus on having better connectivity, like
Mm,
intra-Africa travel. I don't want to
mm,
have to go to Morocco, not Morocco. If I want to go to Morocco, I don't want to have to go to Europe to go back to Africa. Or if I want to
mm,
go to South Africa, I don't want to have to travel out to come back. So let's make intra-Africa travel easier,
mm.
affordable, and I think that once more people can flow, then I don't even see the language as a gap. But yeah, I was in Lome the other day. They don't speak French. I mean, they don't speak English. They speak French.
English.
I had to go from Nigeria to Cotonou to Lome, and
Right.
I had to brush up on my French. I'm not saying that, sometimes I think, so you want all the people so all the Asians, are we saying all the people in Asia to go and speak one language for them to understand each other? No, those are distractions. Let's focus on empowering people. Let's focus on movement. Let's focus on trade. Let's focus on the things that can actually move the needle. Let's focus on peace and security. Why do we have wars? Why do we have strife? It's scarcity. People are scared, poverty mentality. They want to protect what they have. Let's create this sense of abundance, this spirit, right? And you'll see that all of those other things will pale down in comparison. Now, to talk about visa policies. Now, I know that I have a good account that part of why our visa policies are so restrictive is because we're doing some sort of retaliatory visa regime. So the more difficult it is for Nigerians to get visas to some countries, the more difficult it is for those countries to get visas here.
Right.
And that's not a Nigerian thing. They do that around the world. They have retaliatory visa regimes because why should it be easier for your citizens than for our citizens? But that being said, I do agree that there is an administrative issue in terms of passports and how we issue them, how often we do that. But I know that with this new regime, there has really been a lot of work to clear the backlog. And it's time to see how we can really make Nigeria more attractive, more appealing, and also make it easier. And when I say easier, I'm not even joking. Easier means just know that if I submit my passport here, and they say, come for your visa here, there's not like 20 different things. So that sense of a harmonious process, for sure, we need to have that.
Awesome. Thank you. You just have to ask me one question, and I'll be very short with my answer.
I wonder when you're coming back to Nigeria, what your plan is to contribute to public health, public sector, and it's true, public health and public sector.
No, it's a great question. I tried to come back in 2021. I was with what I thought was going to be a great company that will keep me in Nigeria, especially as soon as I got my papers here. Unfortunately, the company is not even working altogether. And that's really saddened me, frustrated me. And so I will speak to you after this because I know you have to go about some of these volunteer opportunities. I know we didn't get to talk a lot about Sahara, but thank you for sharing a little bit about it because I think that might be a good place for me to start. Like if I can do it remotely first, because I think that once I can kind of just get my feet going, it will be easier to go. But everybody knows I love Nigeria. I want to be home. I keep trying to think through the considerations of what works and what will work. And I don't want to waste my time, because that feeling of you're getting older and you don't want to waste your time. So you want to come in with a clear plan and purpose. But I really will reach out to you about Sahara. And thank you so much. I think everybody should obviously follow you. We'll share your pages on the podcast, the public ones, of course. Thank you so much, Adun. I really appreciate your time.
And no, Buki, sorry, Ayomide.
Yeah, fine. Buki's fine. Everybody calls me whatever.
No, honestly, I really enjoyed this. Like, I look at the time and I'm just like, gosh, wow, you're beautiful podcast host and hostess, and I think host. I don't know the English. Is it host or hostess? Which one is the correct one?
No.
Host. Okay, but you're a fantastic podcast host. I love the questions, very well researched, and I just want to say that yes, Sahara Center. Maybe we'll come back and talk about that another time. But it's definitely something that we have different people in diaspora that see it as a way that they can also contribute. But just also say that, when people say I don't want to waste my time, like, is time ever wasted? I feel like the life is a journey. The road is made by walking. Right. The path is defined as we carve it, right? So I see it more as a exploration, right? It's like when you get it, I don't know, like, is it that when we get it, we're going to die? No, of course not.
Thank you so much. This was perfect. Thank you. God bless you. Thank you for joining me on today's episode. Just like you would share with friends about a great book you read, don't forget to share this if you enjoyed it. Connect with us on IG and Twitter at TWWPcast and get details on the website at worldwithoutpeople.org. And hey, remember to make loving others the story of your life. Until next time, this is the World Without People.